If you're watching this, I'm already gone, not dead, just unpersoned. My bank accounts are empty. My name has been scrubbed from every database in the country. To the FBI, I'm a ghost. To the CIA, I'm a loose end. To the world, I never existed. And in exactly 10 minutes, the same thing is going to happen to you. That is Ananya Rao, a woman whose life was deleted before she ever had a chance to say goodbye. They say the human brain is the ultimate pattern recognition machine. We look at the stars and see hunters and bears. We look at a stranger's face and see a friend or a threat. We look at a city and see a home. But the machines don't see patterns. They see probability. They see the mathematical likelihood that you will buy a specific brand of coffee, that you will vote for a specific candidate, or that you will simply stop being a part of the equation. This is the story of the silence map, a technology so powerful that it was deemed too dangerous for the CIA, yet too perfect for the FBI to ignore. It doesn't just track where you go, it predicts when you've become expendable. And once the map decides you don't matter, you don't just go to prison, you simply vanish from the grid. October 24th, Logan International Airport, Boston. The terminal is a cathedral of glass and anxiety. Ananya Rao stands by the sliding doors. To the casual observer, she is the picture of vulnerability. 7 months pregnant, clutching a worn leather bag. But as she walks past the TSA checkpoints, she isn't looking at the tourists. She's looking for the men in the nondescript navy windbreakers, the ones with the earpieces and the hollow eyes. In her pocket, she feels the scrap of paper. She doesn't need to look at it. She's memorized the handwriting, Ethan's handwriting. Slanted, hurried, the M in Miller trailing off like a fatting pulse. Ethan Miller. Last seen October 12. She remembers the last time she saw him, New York City, a Tuesday morning that felt like every other Tuesday. He was complaining about the toaster. He kissed her forehead. He said, "I'll be back Sunday, Anu. We'll pick out the crib then." He didn't look like a man about to vanish. He didn't look like a man carrying the secrets of a digital genocide. The taxi driver is an older man with a radio playing soft jazz. He glances at her in the rearview mirror. First time in Boston, Ananya looks out at the Zachem Bridge, its white cables stretching like the ribcage of a giant beast. "My husband lives here," she says. Her voice doesn't tremble. That's the first lie. "Lucky man," the driver says. "Bet he's excited about the little one." Ananya doesn't answer. She looks at the red and gold leaves clinging to the trees along the Charles River. They are beautiful, but they are dying. Everything in this city feels like it's in a state of beautiful decay. She thinks back to the first time she met Ethan. It was a conference on data ethics in Zurich. He was the one who asked the question no one else dared to ask. If we can predict a crime before it happens, does the person who would have committed it still have a soul? Everyone laughed. Ananya didn't. She looked at him and saw someone who, like her, saw the code beneath the skin. They were married 6 months later, a quiet ceremony in Brooklyn. No family, no friends. Just two people who knew too much about the world to ever truly trust anyone else. Before vigilance systems, there was the strategic subject list in Chicago. It was a real-world algorithm developed to predict who would be involved in a shooting. The computer didn't look for weapons. It looked at your friends, your zip code, and how many times you had been stopped by police. It created a heat list. People found themselves on this list without ever having committed a violent crime. In 2016, the Rand Corporation evaluated the program. They found it didn't reduce violence. Instead, it gave police a list of people to harass. It created a feedback loop where the algorithm justified the surveillance, and the surveillance fed the algorithm. This was the primitive ancestor of the silence map. A machine designed to fix a problem, but instead, it only learned how to target the vulnerable. Kendall Square is the most innovative square mile on the planet. It's a maze of glass cubes and labs where they edit genes and build robots. Ethan's apartment is on the 12th floor of a building that looks like a stack of silver bento boxes. The superintendent, a man named Henderson, meets her in the lobby. He's wearing a crisp uniform, but his eyes are tired. He's been through this already. With the police, with the private investigators. He looks at Ananya's belly and his posture softens. This is the biosocial hack in action. A man will lie to a detective. A man will hide things from a lawyer. But a man will almost always open the door for a pregnant woman in distress. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Rao," Henderson says, the keys jingling in his hand. "The police, they spent 3 days in there. They took the electronics. They didn't find any sign of a break-in." "I know," Ananya says softly. "I just need to be where he was." The door swings open. The apartment smells like Ethan's cedarwood candles and cold air. It is hauntingly tidy. There's a book on the coffee table, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, with a bookmark halfway through. A half-empty glass of water sits on the nightstand, the dust just beginning to settle on the surface. Ananya waits for Henderson to leave. She waits until she hears the click of the heavy door. Then she moves. She doesn't go for the desk. She doesn't look at the bookshelf. She goes to the laundry hamper. She pulls out a discarded shirt, the navy blue one he wore to work. She buries her face in it. She inhales. For a second the mask slips. The architect disappears and the wife returns. The smell of his cologne, sandalwood, and citrus is a physical blow. Her knees weaken. She gasps, a sound of raw, unedited grief. It is the only real thing in this entire room. But then the pattern recognition kicks in. She feels the weight of the shirt. In the left cuff there's a stiffness, a tiny, unnatural lump. She unbuttons the cuff and pulls out a microSD card no bigger than a fingernail. Ethan knew how they worked. He knew that the police would check the obvious hiding spots, the vents, the freezer, the hollowed-out books, but they wouldn't check the laundry of a man they assumed had just walked out on his life. They saw a deadbeat dad narrative. Ethan gave them exactly what they expected to see. Ananya sits on the floor, her back against the bed. She pulls a modified tablet from her leather bag, a device with no Wi-Fi chip, no Bluetooth, completely dark. She inserts the card. The screen flickers. A spreadsheet appears. Thousands of rows, thousands of names. Column A, name. Column B, last known location. Column C, social impact score. She scrolls. The scores are all low. 010.05, 0.12. She finds a name she recognizes. Caleb Turner, score, 0.18. Then she finds a name she doesn't. Ananya Rao, score, 0.02. Her breath hitches. According to this map, she is the most expendable person in the country. To the system, she is a ghost before she's even dead. Detective Mark Hollies is a man made of coffee and disappointment. His office in the Boston PD is cluttered with files of missing persons who were never really missing, just people who didn't want to be found. "Mrs. Rao," he says, leaning back, "I've gone over the footage from Kendall Square. Your husband left the building at 8:14 p.m. on the 12th. He walked toward the red line. He never swiped his Charlie card. He didn't take an Uber. He just walked into the shadows." "And you think that's normal?" Ananya asks. She is sitting perfectly still, her hands folded over her stomach. "In this neighborhood, in this city," Holly sighs, "people come here to reinvent themselves. They get burnt out. They get scared. Your husband worked in cyber risk. He saw things that keep people up at night. Maybe he just wanted to sleep." Ananya leans forward. The light from the overhead fluorescent tube flickers, casting long shadows over her face. "My husband didn't run, detective. He was canceled." "Do you know what a social friction model is?" Hollies blinks. "Is that some tech jargon?" "It's an algorithm," Ananya says, her voice dropping to a whisper. "It measures how much friction would be caused if a person disappeared. If you have a large family, a high-profile job, and 1 million followers, your friction is high. The system flags you as persistent. But if you're an immigrant, if your family is overseas, if you work in a classified field where you can't talk about your day, your friction is 0. You can be removed from the map, and the world won't even skip a beat." Hollies looks at her with a mix of pity and concern. "That's a hell of a theory, Mrs. Rao, but we don't investigate math, we investigate crimes." "Then investigate this," she says, sliding a printout across the desk. "It's a list of 5 men who disappeared in the last year, all tech workers, all immigrants, all with low friction. One was a father of 3 in Malden. One was a PhD student at Harvard. One was a janitor at the State House. All of them had one thing in common. They had seen the wrong file at the wrong time. Hollis doesn't look at the paper, he looks at her. Go home, Ananya, think about the baby. Don't go looking for ghosts. You might find them. Hollis wasn't a bad man. He was just a man who believed the world was still analog. He didn't realize that in a digital world, the only thing more dangerous than being seen is being ignored. The next day, the rain has turned into a cold, biting sleet. Ananya stands at the back of a lecture hall at MIT. The room smells of wet wool and expensive coffee. At the front, Caleb Turner is packing like a caged animal. He's lecturing on algorithmic bias in national security. He's brilliant, but he's falling apart. His tie is crooked. His eyes are darting to the doors every 30 seconds. He knows the map is looking for him. When the lecture ends, the students swarm him with questions. Ananya waits. She stays in the shadows of the upper tier. When the last student leaves, she descends. Turner is packing his laptop, his hands shaking so violently he can barely zip the bag. Caleb, she says. He freezes. He doesn't look up. I don't know you. You know Ethan, she says. Turner finally looks at her. His face goes pale. He looks at her belly, then back at her eyes. You're the wife. He told me about you. He said you were the only one who could understand the logic. He's gone, Caleb. They erased him. They didn't erase him, Turner hisses, stepping closer. They harvested him. Ethan found the back door. The government didn't build the silence map, Ananya. A private company did. Vigilance Systems. They sold it to the feds as a way to predict domestic terrorism. But the algorithm, it got hungry. It started identifying anyone who could threaten the system's own existence. Caleb explains the mechanism. It's called the absence ripple. When a person vanishes, the system measures how long it takes for someone to notice. If no one calls the police within 24 hours, your score drops. If no one posts on social media, it drops again. By the time Ethan was taken, his ripple was non-existent. He had isolated himself to protect Ananya, not realizing that isolation was the very thing that made him a target. To understand the silence map, we must look at the real-world implementation of social credit in China. This isn't just a science fiction trope. It is a live system affecting over 1 billion people. If you play too many video games, your score drops. If you post unreliable news, your score drops. And the consequences are physical. Over 23 million people have been blocked from buying plane or train tickets because their social reliability was too low. They didn't commit crimes, they simply became low friction in the eyes of the state. Vigilance Systems took this concept and sanitized it for the West. They didn't call it social credit, they called it risk assessment. They didn't target your behavior, they targeted your social necessity. It was a more efficient way to silence dissent. Don't put people in jail, just make it impossible for them to participate in society. Where is the data center? Ananya asks. Northern Virginia, but you'll never get near it. They have sensors that can read your heartbeat from the parking lot. If your pulse isn't authorized, you're flagged before you hit the door. Suddenly, Turner's phone pings. A short, sharp sound. He looks at the screen, his eyes fill with tears. They're here, he whispers. Who? The story, Turner says. They're closing my story. He grabs her arm. His grip is desperate. Listen to me. Ethan didn't just find the map. He built a poison pill, a piece of code that would force the system to reveal every person it ever erased. But he needed a zero client, someone the system couldn't predict. He pushes a key into her hand, a physical key, old-fashioned and brass. The storage unit in Chelsea. Get there. And for God's sake, Ananya, stop being a wife. Start being the architect. Ananya walked out of that building as the sun began to set. She didn't look back when she heard the sirens. She didn't look back when the news reports hit the radio 2 hours later. MIT professor Caleb Turner found dead of an apparent overdose. She just sat in her rental car, gripped the steering wheel, and felt the prosthetic belly beneath her coat. It was warm. It was heavy. It was the only thing that made her feel real in a world that was turning into code. The drive from Cambridge to Chelsea is short, but the transition is jarring. You leave the polished glass of the biotech labs and cross into a world of rusted bridges, salt piles, and low-slung industrial warehouses. This is where Boston hides the things it doesn't want to look at. Ananya pulls the rental car into the gravel lot of Anchor Storage. The rain has turned into a persistent gray drizzle that makes the corrugated metal of the storage units look like they're weeping. She feels the weight of the brass key in her pocket. Unit 402. The lock is heavy, caked in sea salt. When the door rolls up, the screech of metal on metal sounds like a scream in the silence of the afternoon. The unit is small, smelling of dust and ozone. It's not filled with furniture or old clothes. There are 3 servers hummed by a portable battery pack, a tangle of fiber optic cables snaking across the floor like synthetic vines, and a single metal chair. In the corner there is a trunk. Ananya opens it. Inside she finds the tools of her true trade: a high-resolution passport printer, a kit for creating synthetic fingerprints, thermal shielding fabric, and a thick, leather-bound notebook filled with her own handwriting from 5 years ago. She sits in the chair and opens the notebook. The first page contains a single sentence: "To build a system that sees everything, you must first become the person who sees nothing." She begins to work. She isn't searching for Ethan anymore. She is building his ghost. She connects her dark tablet to the local servers. On the screen, she watches the silence map in real time. She sees the pulses of light over the wealthy suburbs, high-friction lives, shielded by wealth and visibility. And she sees the dark patches over the zones of silence. She initiates the erasure protocol. One by one, she enters her own data points. She doesn't just delete them, she replaces them with noise. She creates 1,000 digital versions of Ananya Rao. One is a teacher in London. One is a nurse in Mumbai. One is a student in Toronto. She is confusing the algorithm. She is creating a data storm. As the servers hum, she reaches for a pair of surgical scissors. She looks into a small, cracked mirror. She doesn't hesitate. She cuts her hair, the dark locks falling to the concrete floor like discarded memories. She applies a darker pigment to her skin. She changes the shape of her eyebrows. But the biggest change is the child. She unzips her coat and removes the prosthetic belly. She lays it on the table. Inside, it is a masterpiece of engineering. She opens a hidden compartment in the silicone. She pulls out the microSD card she found in Ethan's shirt cuff. She inserts it into the prosthetic's internal drive. Then she adds the poison pill Caleb mentioned, a recursive script designed to overload the silence map's central processor. She straps the belly back on. This time, it's not just camouflage. It's a bomb, a digital explosive designed to detonate the moment she steps inside the vigilance system's data center. Her phone vibrates. Anu. The voice is faint, buried under layers of static and digital distortion. It's Ethan. Her heart stops. "Ethan, where are you? Don't come for me," he whispers. The map. It's not just tracking, it's predicting. It knows you're in Chelsea. It knows about the unit. "I'm finishing it, Ethan. I have the pill. They let you find it, Anu. They wanted the pill. They needed someone with your clearance to bring the virus into the core because they couldn't patch the hole themselves. You're not the hacker. You're the delivery system. They want the architect to walk through the front door." The line goes dead. Ananya stands in the center of the dark unit. The realization hits her like a physical blow. The agency didn't kill Ethan to hide the map. They used Ethan to bait the architect. They knew she would come. They knew she would use the pregnancy as a shield. They designed the vulnerability so she would fill it. She hears the sound of tires on gravel outside. 2 black SUVs pull into the lot, blocking the exit. She looks at the servers. She looks at the child strapped to her body. "They think they've predicted me," she whispers to the empty room. She reaches for a canister of gasoline. She strikes a match. As the storage unit erupts in a wall of orange flame, Ananya walks straight toward the SUVs. She doesn't look like a victim. She doesn't look like a grieving wife. She looks like a woman who has finally realized that the only way to beat a system that predicts the future is to become a variable that doesn't care if it has one. The SUV's doors fly open. Men in tactical gear step out. Ananya Rao, hands in the air. She raises her hands. She smiles. "I'm not Ananya Rao," she says, her voice carrying over the roar of the fire. "I'm the glitch." The transition from the burning storage unit to the interior of a black SUV is a blur of kinetic energy and clinical silence. They don't cuff her hands behind her back. They cuff them in front, mindful of the child. Even now, in the hands of the men who erased her husband, the biological imperative holds. They see the belly and they see a fragile vessel. They don't see the weapon. The drive from Chelsea to Northern Virginia takes 6 hours. 6 hours of silence. The headquarters of Vigilance Systems is located in a dead zone in the Virginia woods. It's a building that doesn't appear on Google Maps. To the world, this is a blank space. To the people inside, this is the center of the universe. As the gates hum open, Ananya feels a vibration against her skin. It's the prosthetic. The poison pill is waking up. It's hungry. She is led through a series of pressurized airlocks into a room that is blindingly white. It's an interrogation suite, but it looks like a high-end surgical theater. There is no wooden table, no swinging light bulb, just a single chair and a wall of glass that overlooks the pit, the massive, submerged server farm where the silence map lives. A man enters. This is Julian Vane, the architect of the silence map. Ananya, he says, his voice warm and familiar. You have no idea how long I've waited for you to sit in that chair. The pregnancy, it's a touch of genius. It creates a psychological blind spot that even my best analysts couldn't override. We spent millions training the AI to ignore expectant mothers. It's the ultimate heuristic bias. Where is he, Julian? Ananya asks. Her voice is a flatline. Ethan is part of the system now, Vane says. He didn't die, Ananya. He was optimized. In 2003, the U.S. government briefly flirted with a project called Total Information Awareness, or TIA. Led by Admiral John Poindexter, the goal was to aggregate every piece of digital data on every citizen, emails, credit card transactions, medical records, into a single massive database to find patterns of threat. Public outcry led to the project being officially canceled by Congress. But it didn't die. It just went private. Vigilance Systems is the ghost of TIA, reborn in the private sector where oversight is a suggestion rather than a law. This is the reality of the digital age. Once a technology exists to control a population, it is never truly deleted. It only waits for a company bold enough to sell it back to the state under a new, cleaner name. Vane explains the true purpose of the map. It's not about catching criminals, it's about stability. If the system can predict which people will cause the most trouble, it can remove them before they ever say a word. It's a preemptive strike against the future. Ethan had discovered the final phase of the project, the automation of disappearance. No more SUVs, no more tactical teams, just a quiet removal of bank accounts, health insurance, and digital existence. You become a non-person while you're still breathing. Vane presses a button and the glass wall becomes a screen. A face appears. It's Ethan, but it's a digital reconstruction. Anu, the digital Ethan, says, you have to give it to them, the pill. It's the only way to save the others. This is the ultimate psychological warfare. They want her to believe that her husband is part of the machine. Ananya looks at the digital ghost of her husband. She feels a tear track down her cheek. I have it, she whispers, the code. It's in the drive. Vane smiles. A technician approaches with a cable. He plugs the cable into the hidden port. On the massive screens in the pit, a progress bar appears. Data extraction, 10%, 20%, 40%, upload complete. The screens in the room don't turn green. They turn blood red. A siren begins to wail. The digital image of Ethan begins to distort into a static-filled scream. What did you do? Vane shouts. You built a system to predict who matters, Ananya says, standing up. You forgot the first rule of systems architecture. A system is only as strong as its most vulnerable user. I didn't bring a poison pill. The pill was the bait. The code I uploaded was a mirror. I've reconfigured the algorithm. It's no longer looking for the weak. It's identifying the people whose removal would create the most stability for the rest of the world. I've turned your weapon against your masters. The silence map isn't crashing, it's expanding. The dots on the map, the expendable people, are disappearing, but in their place new dots are appearing. Name, Julian Vane. Social impact score, 0. Vane's phone pings. A robotic voice echoes through the facility. Target identified, Julian Vane. Status, expendable. Removal protocol initiated. The doors to the interrogation room hiss open, not because Ananya hacked them, but because the system no longer recognizes Vane as the person in charge. To the machine, he is now noise that needs to be cancelled. Ananya walks out of the room. She passes the tactical teams who are staring at their own tablets in horror. They see their own names on the list. They see their scores plummeting. In the chaos, she makes her way to the server core. She doesn't look for Ethan. She knows he's gone. She looks for the source. She finds the central hub, the beating heart of the silence map. She pulls a final drive from her pocket. This isn't a virus. It's a broadcast. As she reaches the final airlock, she finds Detective Holly standing by the exit. He looks at his phone, then at her. "My score is 0.05, he says. "What happens now?" "Now," Ananya says, stepping out into the cold Virginia night. "Now the story stops watching us, and we start watching the story." The collapse of the silence map wasn't an explosion. It was a cascade. When Ananya inverted the logic, she didn't just break a program. She broke the hierarchy of the modern world. For decades, the elites had used data as a wall. They were the high-friction citizens. But when the mirror script took hold, that importance became a target. Within 48 hours, the silence map had deconstructed the very government that commissioned it. The building in Virginia became a tomb of dead data. We see the aftermath across the globe. In London, a billionaire vanishes from his penthouse, his assets frozen by an algorithm that decided his carbon footprint was a threat to the species. In Tokyo, a corrupt minister is locked out of his own office, his biometric ID revoked by a system that predicted his next policy would lead to a recession. The machine was doing exactly what it was designed to do. It was maintaining stability. Only now, it was defining stability as the removal of the people at the top. Legislative hearings followed, but they were a farce. How do you put a line of code on trial? The politicians who survived the purge sat in front of empty cameras, promising transparency while standing in the ruins of a system they never fully understood. They called Ananya Rao a terrorist. They called her a ghost. They put a bounty on a woman who had already deleted her own shadow. But while the world burned in the fires of its own data, the quiet zones began to thrive. In the neighborhoods the map had once ignored, the pressure lifted. The predictive policing stopped. The credit score lockdowns froze. For a brief, flickering moment in human history, the machine stopped guessing what people would do next. It gave them back the one thing the digital age had stolen, the right to be a surprise. People started talking again. They started meeting in person. They started building things that didn't have an IP address. The scene shifts back to that pier in Oregon. Ananya is sitting on a weathered wooden bench. She isn't looking at a screen anymore. She is looking at a child, a real child, playing in the sand a few yards away. She thinks about the photo in her inbox. The man in Bangkok. People ask if Ethan Miller was real or if he was just another layer of the architecture. But Ananya knows the truth. We are all just variables in an equation we didn't write. But every now and then, a variable decides to solve for X. She reaches into her pocket and pulls out a small brass key, the key to the storage unit. She walks to the end of the pier. With a flick of her wrist, she tosses the key into the Pacific. It glints once in the sunlight before the gray water swallows it whole. Ananya Rao turns her back on the ocean and starts to walk. She blends into the crowd of tourists and locals. She is invisible. She is silent. She is free. They're still looking for her, of course. They're looking for the architect. But they're looking for a story that has already been told. And Ananya, she's already started the next chapter. In a world that wants to predict your every move, the greatest act of rebellion is to be unpredictable. We live in the age of the silence map, but remember, the map is not the territory. And you are more than just a data point. What do you think of Ananya's choice? Was she right to turn the weapon on the masters, or did she just create a new kind of monster? Let me know in the comments below. If you want more deep dives into the shadows of the digital age, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell. Until next time, stay off the map.